I get distracted really badly sometimes, if I don't do my routine the same way, like in the morning, if I don't do the things in the order that is a routine and a habit, something gets left out and I don't notice it until, oh, what happened? So, old brains don't work as great. So what can you do? What can you do? Keep going. Okay, let's begin by, I want to just kind of introduce you with catching up. Remember, we left off with Josiah, who was the last godly king of Israel. He reigned from age 8 to age 39. He, it is often said in commentaries and other things that he disobeyed the Lord, but the Lord had plans for Josiah, which he had told him through the prophetess Huldah. Remember, you're not going to see the destruction that I'm going to bring on Jerusalem. So that means this young man had to be taken out. So whether he made the decision himself or not is how you think. I think it was, this is how the Lord led him. He went, the situation was, and I put in the second page or so, you can sort of see a map. It doesn't have a lot of detail, and I didn't mean for it to, but in 609, which is pretty much where we will begin our discussion, the year 609, Nebuchadnezzar's father moved to bring the end to the Assyrian Empire, which was also prophesied given to the prophets to prophesy. They were to, and Nahum describes how it would be done. Assyria had destroyed Babylon a couple of times, and Babylon was rebelling. It had gathered enough strength and force and so forth. It was going to annihilate its captors, Assyria, and it destroyed Nineveh and moved on toward Carchemish, which we'll get to in a minute. The Assyrians were the problem for Judah as well. So Judah, or Josiah, on the behalf as the king of Judah, had decided to go with Babylon to destroy the Assyrians. That was his thinking. We need to get rid of these Assyrians. They're causing us to have to pay all these taxes and all this stuff. If we side with Babylon against Assyria, then we won't have to live under the Assyrians anymore. They had lived under them for many years at this point. King Necho from Egypt was going up the side of Israel, as you can see, along the Mediterranean, on his way up to Carchemish, where they ultimately would meet. But this is still 609. On his way, remember, everything takes longer. It's not a few days war, it's a year's war to do this. But Necho was on his way up to help the Assyrians. And so Josiah said, well, let me just delay, put Necho unable to get up there to help the Assyrians, and the Babylonians will take care of the Assyrians and we'll be home free. Makes sense if you think about it. It was all God's plan, all his providence, how he was moving people and things and events around to accomplish what he wanted to accomplish. Necho even told Josiah, I don't have anything against you. Leave me alone. I'm just going to go up there and take care of business, because Assyria and Egypt were allies and they were getting along. Assyria was leaving Egypt alone and they were kind of allies and not enemies anymore. And Necho wanted to leave that because the Babylonians said, we're going to take the whole thing all the way down to Egypt, which they eventually did. It took many years, but they eventually did. But so Necho was moving up through, he gets to the valley of Megiddo, the Jezreel Valley. And that this is as Napoleon says, the ideal place for a battle, just the geographic layout. And they meet there, and Necho says, don't be bothering me. I have nothing against you. But Josiah said, I'm going to stop you. Josiah is killed with an arrow to his chest, probably. And he dies later on. They get him back to Jerusalem, and he dies in 609 BC. This was prophesied. This would be what would happen. There were just we don't know when it's going to happen, kind of a thing. He is 39 years old, and he has a son who is named Jehoahaz. And that's on your orange chart there. Jehoahaz, his Hebrew name is Shallum. He's 23 years old. Now he has other sons who are older. And I thought, now, what is up with this? This does not make any sense. He's only 39. How can he have a 23-year-old and so forth? But he apparently was a teenager when he started having children. Remember, he's been king since he was 8. So, and I discovered when I read through again, and you have to, every single word, they have different mothers. These boys of Josiah, different mothers. So you can see how they would be ordered. So anyway, Jehoahaz is the natural heir to the kingdom of Judah upon Josiah's death. And let's pick up in the blue column of the chart, and I'll try to do it this way. The blue column first and the green column next. And of course, they're on 2 pages, so it's kind of difficult to figure out. But let's start with Jeremiah and Jehoiakim, and I do that on purpose, in 609. Now, I titled this the years between 634 and 562, which would be all of the last kings of Judah in the time of King Nebuchadnezzar, his father, and him. So it's a wide span of time that these kings look at, and it is obviously before the 609. The 634 begins before the 609, but these are the lives. But what I want you to note is this is the time of the Gentiles that was prophesied by Jeremiah, Isaiah, and Zephaniah. These are the time of the Gentiles means the years in which a Gentile rules Israel. Meaning these boys followed their father, but they were not the kings of Judah put there by God, because Josiah was the last godly king. His son, who would have taken over, probably not a great guy, but he would have taken over naturally, but he was in place only 3 months when he was taken by Necho, who, because he killed the king, he now runs Judah. Necho's a Gentile. He's not a Jew, he's a Gentile. And so he takes the young man, Jehoahaz, to Egypt after only 3 months as king of Judah. There's still turmoil in Jerusalem, I'm sure, because the king has died and they're replacing him with this young man. You know how the transition of people go in the best of times. And so and now Necho is essentially over Judah. And Necho makes a great amount, it forces a great amount of taxes, tribute to be paid to him. And so he never comes back. He dies probably in prison in Egypt. We never hear from Jehoahaz again. But when he takes him, he has to put somebody on the throne to keep things going, keep the trains running and the taxes coming. That's essentially the work of a foreign king over a vassal state. That is, they are no longer in charge of themselves. So that's why, and we'll see that this actually is enforced in 605 as the official time that the time of the Gentiles is in place. We're going to look at the last 22 years of when the Jews are in Judah until the exile, and that's really begins with 609 and the installation of the brother of Jehoahaz. His name is Eliakim, but that's his Hebrew name. And since Necho installed him, he changed his name. That is one of the ways that foreign kings can control you, change your name. You no longer are a Jewish person. You are a servant of mine, and your name is now, he's going to be Jehoiakim. Kim, last part, because he has a son named Chin. I didn't make these names, so we just have to deal with them. If you want to see how these kings are recorded as the descendants of David, that is part of the throne of David, they are recorded in the 3rd chapter of 1 Chronicles as part of that genealogy. And we can see these names appear in the 1st chapter of Matthew. So it's confirmed that these are how these people were. They are included as the people who followed, but we're going to find out something in the book of Jeremiah about these people and why they do not persist as kings. Yes.
Younger son made king before the older son.
That's what the people did.
People just decided.
Read the passages in the Kings. When Josiah died, the people took Jehoahaz and made him king. Okay. They didn't give an explanation of why they chose him instead of another. That's what they did. That's all we have is recorded. So now what I want to do is stop right here and take a look at, I think it's the 2nd page that has a chart there of Jeremiah's lineage, because we have the prophet Jeremiah and his scribe Baruch, his scribe friend, is probably more friend as that happens to be a scribe. These two men are the ones who bring us the book, the prophecy of Jeremiah. And I need to introduce him because we would not know what happened in the fall of Judah unless we had the book of Jeremiah, because he started before. He started in the 13th year of Josiah, the one that was killed in the battle, and went all the way through past the taking them into exile, and he apparently died somewhere probably in Egypt many years later. He was very old, but I wanted you to see Jeremiah. Now, he probably dictated a good bit of it to Baruch. Baruch is to Jeremiah as Luke is to Paul. Have that picture? Remember, Luke went along and wrote things that Paul did, and we have the book of Acts because Luke was there and he saw it and he recorded it. And he probably recorded other things for Paul, but Paul puts it in as a letter from him and so forth. Luke happened to have the skill of writing and sentence construction and all of those things, and Baruch did too. But if you read through Jeremiah, the first thing you know is it is not chronological. And we're going to be looking at Jeremiah beginning today and the next 2 times. It is not even close to chronological. In a lot of places, it's here and there. And it is, and I can just sort of imagine this. They had scrolls, and they would have gathered them up at the time when Nebuchadnezzar came over the wall to destroy Jerusalem, gathered them and tried to hide them and run away with them. And Baruch's job in life was probably to get the scrolls, very much like Timothy was told, bring my coat and bring the scrolls. So somebody's in charge of those things. But look at Jeremiah. This is a special man. We have to go back. He is a priest, but or in the line of priests, but he is not functioning as a priest. He is called to be a prophet, and we'll see that more when we talk about him as a prophet next time. But from his mother's womb, he's called to be a prophet. So, but look, remember all the way back to Levi. That's the tribe that was chosen to be the priest. Levi had 3 sons. Those 3 sons had 3 separate assignments as to the service of the tabernacle or the temple. And the Kohathites were the ones who had the line of being the chief priest. The chief priest would have had to come through that line, and that would have been through Aaron. Aaron, Moses was a child as well of Levi, or Levite. So we go through all the way. We get Aaron's line. You see the high priest there. But we get to Hilkiah. Do you see the star beside Hilkiah? Just before the line that goes to Jeremiah's birth. Who was Hilkiah? Anybody remember the high priest Hilkiah? We just talked about him last week. What did he do? Found the book of the law. And he said to Shaphan, the court, the royal court assistant to the king, take this to Josiah and tell him what we found. And we talked about that last. So Hilkiah was a chief priest. You see that? He had 3 sons, one of whom is Jeremiah. Jeremiah was told to not marry and have no children because you don't want to see them being raped and killed in the coming destruction of Israel, of Judah. Jeremiah we see mentioned, and Azariah is mentioned as well. And he is the one who ultimately, Ezra, the priest prophet, who was in exile, born in exile, when they were taken. So it really is kind of an interesting thing that we have this much information about this man, Jeremiah. Now, why is it so important that we take some time? Jeremiah, we know most about the man, the prophet Jeremiah, than any personal kind of data, because he wrote as if he were recording, like a log or a journal, through the events that went in these 22 years that we're going to be talking about before the fall and after the fall. He sums up his book, or Baruch probably pulled things together from all of the whole book. In chapter 52 is sort of an overview of all of these, or the very last 11 or so years of that 22. So much of the material in these columns, I go through all that, is coming from the book of Jeremiah, not the books of Kings and Chronicles, which you see are not very much detail or given. There's the important stuff, like who was king and how long and age and his mother and things like that, sort of the biographical things. But we get only from the book of Jeremiah the pathos, the drama, the fear, the horror of what they experience. And like I have said so many times, it's really hard to be a prophet. What he was asked to do is, not what most humans are required to do. So let's look again back. Now, we finished with 609. Presently on the throne in Judah is, as you can see, it begins actually in 609. A 25-year-old Jehoiakim is on the throne. I put there at the very end of that statement, Jeremiah had nothing good to say about Jehoiakim. Now, he had known Jehoiakim from his birth. He had known Josiah. They grew up together. Josiah and Jeremiah knew each other for many years. So he knew him from the start, all through his whole time. He would be king for 11 years. For most of those 11 years, he's under Necho of Egypt, and they're paying heavy tribute. Now, I had to kind of laugh with all the discussion about 82,000 IRS agents or something going to be added to collect taxes. I'm thinking, I wonder how many they had to add to collect all the taxes that were required by King Necho to keep Jerusalem from being destroyed by Necho. Necho really didn't want to destroy Jerusalem because the whole land of Israel is just a way to get from south to north. It's of no value. The city of Jerusalem was of no value to any of the kings, but it would be an obstruction to the traffic between the north and the south, the kingdoms of the north and the south. So 608, this is the first year or so of Jehoiakim's reign. He is now the king of Judah. The Jeremiah is sent by the Lord to do his courtyard message to the king. This is recorded beginning in chapter 7 or so of Jeremiah. We'll talk about those messages more next time, but I just want you to see that Jeremiah is sent directly to preach in the courtyard of the temple, not in the palace and not among the people, but in the place where people would gather in the courtyard of the temple with a message to the king and all the people. And of course, his message was, you better repent or the Lord will destroy the temple and this city. Now, you know, that comes over real well to people. Either repent or be destroyed. So what do? We set out to kill Jeremiah because we don't like what you're saying. Does that happen today? They wanted to cancel Jeremiah, get him out of the way. They tried to kill him, but we have recorded in Jeremiah, and you have to read the whole book a few times. I'm giving you a warning to figure it all out. It's just all kinds of places that this stuff is, and it takes a little time to sort out sort of an order to it. Baruch didn't do the good job with that. He did a good job with keeping everything recorded, but he didn't get it all quite in order. I might take that up with him someday. They tried to kill Jeremiah, but Micah, remember Micah back there? Amos, Hosea, Micah, we talked about a long time ago. The one that had the prophecy about where Jesus would be born in Bethlehem and all that stuff. Well, in his prophecy, chapter 3, verse 12, it talks about if what the prophet says comes true, it is a true prophet. If what the prophet said is false, kill him. That was the word from the original prophet Moses in chapter 18 of Deuteronomy. This is how you tell. And so Micah says, you got to give the guy a little time here, because what he says might come true and you will have killed him. And that you would have his blood on your hands. So Micah actually saved him. And so, but Uriah at the same time was saying, what he's saying, what Jeremiah is saying is not true. This city will not be destroyed. This temple will not be destroyed. And his argument was, this is God's temple. Do you think God's going to destroy his own temple, the one with his name on it, the one he came to Solomon and said, this is my house and I'll put my name? Do you think God would do that? And this is his city. Do you think he's going to destroy his own city? Pretty good argument, isn't it? It would make sense, wouldn't it? And Uriah said that. He said, what Jeremiah is saying is wrong and blasphemous, and you need to kill him. And Uriah gets a little earful from Jeremiah, who talks back to him and says, what you're saying is going to lead the people astray, and they will not repent, and therefore they will be destroyed because they're believing you. And by the way, you're going to be dead before the end of the year. And that happened.
What is one sentence? Uriah was killed for prophesying the same message. What same message?
About Jerusalem's destruction. It's not prophesying against that same message. Against that. That's not clear. I'm sorry.
Very. So was Uriah considered a false prophet?
This was a false prophet and identified as such in Jeremiah. Anakim, remember Shaphan? Josiah's court recorder or so, the one who took the book to Josiah, the book of the law to Josiah. His son is the one who kept Jeremiah safe, got him out of the limelight, out of the way. Okay. From the years 607 and 606, Jehoiakim opposes Jeremiah, and the Egyptian forces battle Babylonian forces up near the Euphrates River, and Habakkuk is written. So let's jump over to the prophecy of Habakkuk, and that's just close to these kings ones. It's page 845, I think, page 845. Sorry about that, but Habakkuk is one of those little teeny minor prophets in the back of your Bible where the pages stick together and they're all still white and clean. I'll give you a minute. We're not going to spend a lot of time here, but I want you to look at the beginning of Habakkuk. Now, Habakkuk is contemporary with Jeremiah, Daniel, Zephaniah, actually Jehoiakim and others. So he's right in this range. And he is a unique prophet in that he tells a story like Jonah told a story, kind of his story written. And he is not a prophet to the people. In other words, he doesn't go and preach to the people so much. He has a prophecy because he went to the Lord and said, why aren't you doing something? Look at this mess in this world around us. Look at what's going on in Jerusalem, evil and so forth. He said, he begins it, the pronouncement that the prophet Habakkuk saw. This is what he saw was going on in his day. Now look, be Lord, he's crying out in prayer to the Lord. Verse 3, as well as actually verse 2, I call out, but you do not listen or cry out to you about violence. That's the first thing he saw. It's violent. Everything's violent. People are killing each other all around us. And you don't save anybody. You aren't getting in there and protecting us from these evil Egyptians who are coming in and taking over. Why do you force me to look at injustice? That was another thing Isaiah talked about all the time. Jerusalem was a very unjust place. They did not have equal protection, so to speak, under the law. Kind of like now. Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? This is Habakkuk laying his heart out before God in prayer. Why do you let all this stuff, oppression and violence, right in front of me, he said. Why aren't you paying attention, God? Where are you? Why aren't you doing something about this situation here? Have you ever prayed that? What aren't you fixing us in America? Look at this mess we're in. God says, answers him. Verse 5, chapter 1, verse 5. Look at the nations and observe and be utterly astounded. This is the answer from God back to Habakkuk. I am doing something in your days that you won't believe. Even if I tell you what I'm going to do, you wouldn't believe it. When you hear about it, you're not going to believe what you hear. I am raising up the Chaldeans. Now, Chaldeans is the generic name for the Babylonians. They're synonymous. They're interchangeable in the prophecies. And then he talks about them. I'm going to bring the Chaldeans to fix this problem. Habakkuk prays back. Verse 12. Are you out of your mind? Talking about, that's not exactly the correct translation, but that's essentially what he said. Are you not from eternity, Lord my God, Holy One? You will not die. Lord, you appointed them to execute judgment. What are you doing? They're evil. They're more evil than us. How can you send somebody more evil to fix our evil?
Verse number 7 answers that question.
Pardon me?
Verse number 7, I feel answers that question when the Lord tells him they're fierce and terrifying and they're.
Back up in verse 7, Amanda, you're right. Their views of justice and sovereignty stem from themselves. Yeah, the Babylonians are quite different than you. Actually, they were quite ordered society. They in Babylon did not have this kind of injustice and intolerance and so forth. They had a much smoother thing, but they were still evil idolaters and so forth. And so, but do you see Habakkuk saying, what's up with this? This doesn't make any sense. Well, what do we know about God by now that helps us understand?
He knows what he's doing.
Doesn't. His doesn't.
We do not think like God. Our minds cannot think like God because we are not God. And what is it when we have this same prayer that Habakkuk was praying? What are we to do? When we say, what are you doing? What are we going to do about our children in the public schools who are being fed evil stuff? How can we, what are you doing about this, Lord? To protect children. And God says, I am working, and what I'm doing, you wouldn't believe me anyway. So what are we supposed to do?
Trust.
Trust. Thank you, Christine. That is always the right answer. Trust me. I know what I'm doing. I have this in control. This will happen just the way I have it ordered to happen. Trust me. Well, Habakkuk, being a righteous man, says in verse 2, or chapter 2, rather, verse 1, okay, I am going to get up, I'm just translating this in my understanding here. I'm going to get up on the wall of the city of Jerusalem and watch to see if you are really going to do this while I'm still alive. Are you going to do this judgment of the Babylonians coming after us into Jerusalem? Are you going to do this in my lifetime? And he's standing up, he's taking a watch. I'm just going to sit here and watch and see. Well, what is that? What does that help us with? Part of trusting is our other favorite thing to do. Wait. Wait. I'm not on your timetable, I'm on my timetable, God says. So, and the Lord answered him and said, write down this vision clearly. Did Habakkuk write down his vision? We're reading it. So yes, he did. Write down this vision, clearly inscribe it on tablets, so one may easily read it, meaning make it nice big letters, like a poster, that you can post and people can see it easily and won't be confused. Won't be confused. For the vision is yet for the appointed time. I've got a ticker on my calendar, and when it comes up to that time on the calendar and the day, hour, minute, it'll happen. It's appointed, it's already decided. It's in the plan already written out. It testifies about the end, and this will be of Jerusalem and the temple, and will not lie, though it delays. What does it say? What is our instruction? Our most fun thing to do. Wait and trust. I hate to wait. I hate to wait. I really do. But it is some of the most important lessons that I've ever had is waiting on the Lord. It's just so important. So, and while you're waiting, it continues with the thought, behold, his ego is inflated, meaning Nebuchadnezzar, the one coming, his ego is inflated. He's got the idea that I'm going to conquer this place, and he will be without integrity. He's going to be greedy. But, and this is the key verse of the whole 3 chapters of the book of Habakkuk. But while you're waiting, righteous one, the righteous one will live, stay alive, do your daily activities by his faith. That was actually recorded 3 times in the New Testament. Different writers, different times, different books. And there are 3 key words in that phrase. Righteous. We need to know who God is referring to as the righteous. And the word live, that's how you walk, your life, the way you live your life as a righteous person. And faith. The first is the first part of it is the righteous one will live by his faith. Those 3 key: righteous, live, and faith. The first one, Romans 1:17, defines righteous. It emphasizes using the same phrase. Paul emphasizes the word righteous. And if you read the context of chapter 1, we know who is the righteous. In Hebrews 10:38, the focus is on live, how to live by faith. And we have a whole explanation that leads up to that chapter. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. And in Galatians 3:11, the emphasis is on faith. So if you really want to do a study on this phrase and what it means, those 3 sources repeat that phrase, but have an emphasis on each of those 3 words. I'm sure that's just a coincidence. But that's what we're to do. While there is a promise that the end is coming, we are to wait for it and trust God with taking care of it. And while we're doing it, we are to live by faith. And that's the book of Habakkuk. He goes through 5 woes in the chapters, that the rest of chapter 2, 5 or 6. And he ends chapter 2 after he talks about the woes, and these are the specific things that are going to happen. Woe is always a pronouncement of judgment. Woe to you, that's a pronouncement of judgment. And he goes back to his principle, God's principle of curses. Who gets cursed? The disobedient, unfaithful, ungodly, all of those terms, not trusting, rebellious people. Okay, so he outlines what specifically is going to happen. But the end of it, chapter 2, verse 20, but, another but, always so important to pay attention to the buts. But, where's the Lord? While all this is going on, all these woes are going on, where's the Lord? In his holy temple. Where's his holy temple? It wasn't the one in Jerusalem that he's talking about. Where is his temple? We read about that temple in the book of Revelation specifically, but it's his throne. It's where his throne is. He's in his holy temple. What are we supposed to do as a acknowledgement of that? Don't say anything. Be silent before him. We have nothing to say. And then I think probably after a little bit of time and thinking about what he's doing, Habakkuk writes a song, which is recorded. The chapter 3 is a song, which is sung by Jews still today. And he is praising what God is going to do and will do, or has done. And he says, I know that you did it in the past, essentially. And you're going to do it again. You're going to bring your people through judgment. You've done it in the past. Please do it again. And do it in my lifetime, please, because I want to see you work. I think that's a wonderful song. Kind of, I don't know if I want to live through it, but he did. God is coming to do his work that he has planned, and he's going to, Habakkuk is going to describe what the Lord is doing in music. I think that's a powerful thing. He comes, he says, you come out to save your people, to save your anointed, to crush the leader of the house of the wicked and strip him from the foot to the neck. You pierce his head with his spears. But look at the very end of the song. I heard and trembled within. My lips quivered at the sound. Has music ever brought you to that point of emotional sort of upheaval like that? Now I must quietly wait for the day of distress to come against the people invading us. I've asked for it. God has told me it's coming. Now I must quietly wait for the day of distress. And then he talks about there's not going to be any figs on the trees. There's going to be no fruit on the vines and no olive crops. And yet I will rejoice in the God of my salvation. There's not going to be anything left, but I'm going to rejoice in the God of my salvation. The Lord, my Lord, is my strength. He makes my feet like those of a deer and enables me to walk on mountain heights. And that must have been a beautiful song. He actually gave it to musicians to put it to music. Let's go back now to, as a part of that, we're going to come up to the Battle of Carchemish. That's in that blue column there in 605. Habakkuk probably wrote where this is coming, because in 605 we talked about the Battle of Carchemish last time a little bit. Assyria is defeated. It is no longer an empire. During this time, Nebuchadnezzar's father dies, and Nebuchadnezzar is the crown prince, and he takes over as king. It takes a little bit of time because they've been fighting since 609. So that's 4 years or so. And this is the 4th year, I believe it is, of Jehoiakim, of his reign. And we read about that in Jeremiah as well. At this time, Nebuchadnezzar comes on his way to try to defeat Necho. Remember Necho down there in Egypt? If he's going to defeat the Assyrians and get rid of them for good, there's no more Assyrian empire, he has to now seal his empire by defeating Necho. Well, who's between Carchemish up here and Necho down here? Jerusalem, Judah, actually, the kingdom. And who's on the throne? A vassal of Necho. So we need to take out the king in Jerusalem and Necho in order to make a whole Babylonian empire. You with me? Yes.
Was the one that made Necho made the king, was that Necho's son, Eliakim, or?
No, that's Josiah's son. Eliakim is Josiah's son, and that's who's king. That, if you look in the Chronicles, you can read these names as following Josiah on the throne, in David's throne. Okay, so it's about the 4th or 5th year of his reign. He has been an evil king in Jerusalem, reigning from Jerusalem, and he sees, oh, here comes the Babylonians after Necho. This is our chance to not have to pay taxes anymore. So he rebels against Necho. I'm not paying taxes anymore. And so Necho is not happy, and neither is Nebuchadnezzar. He comes through and he says, okay, I am going to put Jehoiakim under my reign from now on. He's my king. He's not Necho's king anymore. He's my king, and you pay me taxes, Nebuchadnezzar. And by the way, I'm taking your royals, all the best of your royal family, all of these young men, I'm taking them with me. I want to make them my scientists and mathematicians and teachers and lawyers and the people that I need in my kingdom to make it run well. I'm going to bring them back and send them to Babylonian school and teach them our ways and our things. And we have much more knowledge than you do, by the way, of course. And so I'm going to take these. And so he takes Daniel and the other 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, which we read about, but there were probably maybe as many as 100 young men in the range of 17 to 25-ish time, just because of their ages. And these are faithful people because who's teaching them in the palace? The prophets. This is their job. They're the ones who are the teachers of these people, to teach them the law. So the royals are now taken, and this is now the first way. That's why this is said to be the first year of the time of the Gentiles, because Nebuchadnezzar now rules in Jerusalem. Necho didn't actually come to Jerusalem. He just had vassal king over there who was a Jewish man. So this is now Nebuchadnezzar is essentially king of Jerusalem, but he leaves Jehoiakim on the throne at this time. Let's go back to that first page that's all orange. I want to just drop you down to that paragraph, because what is going to happen from now on, the 11 years of Jehoiakim and the 11 years of Zedekiah, which is what is the bulk of the 22 years, was prophesied by Moses and written in the book of Deuteronomy. Now, why would he do that? They haven't even walked across the Jordan yet. Moses is still alive. They haven't walked across the Jordan yet. They certainly haven't entered the promised land and started defeating the nations there. This is before they went into the land. This is what Moses writes. The whole book of Deuteronomy is that those sermons, 5 sermons given to these people to prepare them for going into the land. Chapter 28 is that famous chapter that says, if you obey me, these are the blessings. You will get all of these blessings, and the blessings are all detailed. If you disobey me, these are the curses that'll happen to you. And all the curses are listed. And at the bottom of the curses, and it says, what's going to happen is you are going to be disobedient and idolatrous. And you're going to come to the point where God is going to destroy this nation, Israel. So let's begin in 28:49. It was a long, long chapter, and there was a lot of detail, because this is the fulfillment of what is happening in these last days of Jerusalem. This is the fulfillment of the prophecy given through Moses. In 1405 BC, we are presently in 605. What's that, 700 years, 800 years or so. Long time, before it was even a nation. The Lord will bring a distant nation against you from the end of the earth, and it will swoop down on you like a vulture. We're going to read about that. That's exactly what happened. It is a nation whose language you do not understand, a fierce and heartless nation that shows no respect for the old and no pity for the young. Ruthless. That's why Habakkuk said, you're going to do what? These people are terrible. You're going to choose them to come down and take over? Can you see why he was so like, I can't believe you would do that. How can you do that? They will attack I'm reading quickly through because I don't want to spend too much time. They will attack all the towns and all the land the Lord your God has given you. That has happened in the northern kingdom. Now it's going to happen in Jerusalem in the southern kingdom. Look at this, the siege. This is the second paragraph of that section. The siege and terrible distress of the enemy's attack will be so severe that you will eat the flesh of your own sons and daughters, whom the Lord your God has given you. That is recorded in Jeremiah. That happened. That's what happens when there's no food. Didn't Habakkuk say there's not going to be any figs on, no fruit, no grain, no pigs in the stall, not pigs, but cows in the stall? There's no food. Habakkuk said that's what's going to happen. Even though that's going to happen, I'm going to wait on you and I'm going to be faithful. That's the import of understanding that. It goes through, this is Moses telling the people who it's a way distant thing that's going to happen. Well, Revelation's a way distant thing. Do you think it's going to happen like it says in Revelation?
Yeah.
That's- Shouldn't that happen? When God says, this is what I'm going to do, that's what he's going to do. The most tender-hearted man among you will have no compassion for his own brother, his beloved wife, his surviving children. Look at this. Dropping down about the women. Let's see. The most tender and delicate woman among you, so delicate she would not so much as touch the ground with her foot, will be selfish toward the husband she loves and toward her own son or daughter. She will hide from them the afterbirth and the new baby she has just born, so she herself can secretly eat them. Disgusting, isn't it?
Yeah.
What brings a mother who has just birthed a child to the point where she will eat that and not let her own family have it? What brings people to that point?
Desperation.
When you're starved, you're starved. God said, this is the curse that's coming on you. Curses, judgment, whatever you want, this is going to happen. Deuteronomy 29 at the end of that chapter goes on and talks about how the nations around it are going to say, what were those people doing? They really made their God very mad, because look what their God did to them. He must not be a very good God.
Terry,
Yes.
it must be really hard to understand that starvation, but if you have not ever starved, you can't imagine what it does to you.
And the people, that's a good point, Christine. The people of Jerusalem had not ever experienced anything like that. They had had prosperity, and they had all kind. Had much food. They hadn't gone through. They had been through famines and stuff, but they had never come to this point ever in their history. That's why America is so vulnerable, because we have no idea what deprivation is. I mean, we get mad when the air conditioner breaks. We get really upset when there's no hot water or the electricity went out. We get all miffed about that, knowing it's coming eventually, it's going to come back. We've never, ever experienced that much deprivation. So we, like the woman who is so delicate, who wouldn't even touch her foot to the ground, because privilege, don't have to. We're just like that. So that is an instruction to us, isn't it? That is instruction to us. So we are up to 604. Let me just read the very last part of Deuteronomy 29. That 29 is the last verse. It's the very last sentence on that page. The Lord our God has secrets known to no one. Yeah, he has secrets that he's not revealed. We don't have to worry about those. We don't have to wonder about things that God has not revealed. We're not accountable for them, but we are accountable forever, it says. We are accountable forever for all that he has revealed to us. We've been doing this. This is our 59th week. Look at all the things he's revealed to us through scripture that we are accountable for. That's what he's talking about. Moses wrote that. So, 604. Since the 13th year, which is 627 of Josiah's reign, Jeremiah has been recording and giving his prophecies. He's been recording them in scrolls. We'll read about some of those next couple of weeks. He gives those scrolls to Jehoiakim. By way, now Jehoiakim hated him, wanted to kill him, so he sends Baruch with the scrolls and says, these are the prophecies of Jeremiah. What did Jehoiakim do? I don't like these prophecies. Put them in the fire, burned them. Baruch comes back, well, the king burned the scrolls. Jeremiah says, oh no, what are we going to do now? God tells Jeremiah, just start from the first and write them again. And he did. And there's Baruch saying, well, let's go. And that could have something to do why things are not exactly in order in the prophecy of the book of Jeremiah. Must have been. But now, and I put there the time of the Gentiles begins here. This is the 13th year of Josiah and following that, but the actual marking of the time is the year 605, when Nebuchadnezzar came into Jerusalem and took the first wave of captives. Go through down to there's a lot of detail, but I don't want to spend the time there. Jehoiakim is in 598. Jehoiakim is 3 years delinquent in sending his taxes to Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar is not real happy. So he's going to head south to Judah and collect his taxes. You don't want to send them to me? I'm going to come get them. And so he rides into Jerusalem. And in the meantime, the surrounding countries, Moab, Ammon, Egypt, and others have taken against Jehoiakim as well. Jehoiakim is killed in these skirmishes. He is so detested by the people, and because they're afraid to do anything, they throw his body over the wall. His son, Jehoiachin, I have Kim and Chin. Chin's the son. He is now the third one put on the throne. He is 18. His mama is referred to many times in the scriptures. I think he brought mama along, Queen Mother, to help him out because he's like, what do I do now? Jehoiakim has been killed, his body thrown. He wasn't even buried. That was prophesied by Jeremiah that that's going to happen. In 597, Nebuchadnezzar arrives in Jerusalem and begins to besiege the city. He's not going to burn it or tear down the walls. He's just going to come through and because this is a very unsettled situation. Jehoiakim has just been killed and a new king has been put in, this young man. He comes and seizes that opportunity and he says, I'm going to take captives, and this is the second waves of capturing people. Jeremiah actually records that there were 3,023 captives, of whom, and I put them on that first page, warriors, priests, artisans, officials, Ezekiel, Jeconiah, who is the Hebrew name for Jehoiachin, and his mother, the queen, are all rounded up. These are the exiles taken out. Now, they are not killed. They are exiles. They are captives. They're taken out of the city of Jerusalem, along with all the gold implements from the temple and all the gold from the palace and all the treasures. We're going to read about that in Daniel. And Belshazzar and the writing on the wall and all that. We're going to see that again. He takes all of those implements back to Babylon with him, all these people and the implements, the treasures. You're not going to pay me? Well, I'm coming to take what I want. And he did. Who told that prophecy? Anybody remember who made that prophecy? That people would be sons from your Isaiah preached to Hezekiah. So Daniel's been gone, the first wave, that came true, and this wave as well. Jehoiachin, 18-year-old king, is told by Jeremiah, submit, give in, go with Nebuchadnezzar. Don't cause the destruction of this city. Jehoiachin did that, and he was taken back to Babylon. We're going to read in Jeremiah with that. Jehoiachin would have been an evil king like his father. He didn't have but 3 months to be a king, but he would have been. And we're going to see the prophecy that he would be childless, and after him, no one would ever sit on the throne of David until the Messiah. That's in Jeremiah. We'll get to that as well. So the second wave has happened. There are some indications that it may have been more than this taken, but the most important thing is Ezekiel, the prophet, is taken. He is 25 years old when he is taken amongst the captives, and they work as slaves in the area around Babylon called Chebar, on the river Chebar. And they have a settlement there. And because God planned it this way and ordered it this way, he made Nebuchadnezzar decide it would be better to keep all these people who speak the language and have the culture, keep them all together and make them produce this and this and this and this for the empire. And that's what he did. And they were kept together as a group of exiles. And when we read about it in Ezekiel coming up here after the break and coming up next time, we will read that Ezekiel on his 30th birthday gets a visit from the Lord in the wheel on the wheel and is told, you're my prophet to this people, this group of captives. This is the remnant of Israel that was taken to be set aside so that they could be brought back to the land, which was also a prophecy. Does God know what he's doing? I mean, he really does know exactly what he's doing. And the only thing for us to do is just trust and wait, because we can mess it up royally if we don't. Okay, Jerusalem is now in turmoil. Let's go back up to the green column. Because Nebuchadnezzar, when he takes Jehoiachin with him to Babylon, he leaves Zedekiah. He renamed Medaniah, the Hebrew name, to Zedekiah. He changed his name and made him a vassal king of Babylon. Zedekiah reports and pays tribute to Nebuchadnezzar. And the only reason Jerusalem is still standing is if they will pay their taxes and obey the rules of the empire and let Nebuchadnezzar have what he wants. So he's appointed king and has to pay tribute. And in the meantime, while this is going on, the captives are settling into Chebar on the river to be a settlement of Jews. They're not happy. They make life miserable for Ezekiel, we'll see. It is a mess, but they're not in Jerusalem. What's coming up, the last 11 years, which is the time that Zedekiah will be on the throne, 11 years, the last 11 years is what most of Jeremiah talks about, because this is the time when things wind down to the actual fall of Jerusalem. So I'll go through these kind of quickly. You can read for yourself. We have first thing Jeremiah does about a year after, in 596, he writes a letter. We're going to see that next week. He sends a letter to the exiles and tells them how to live in exile. He begins his, Nebuchadnezzar is now busy fixing the edges of his empire to go all the way to the Mediterranean, all the way down through Egypt, all the way over to nearly India on the east side, way up past the Medes, up almost to the Caspian Sea. It's going to be a massive empire, but he has to work on Tyre. Tyre's on the coast of the Mediterranean. It's a seaport that's been there for hundreds of years. And these are Phoenicians. And these are not like the other people in the Middle East, as usual. These are Japhethites, not Shemites, if you will. These are the ones who settled over in the portions of Greece and southern Europe and so forth. And he has a 13-year siege. This is described in Ezekiel and Jeremiah as being unsuccessful. He tried very hard. He never finishes the job. Alexander the Great has to do that, but it'll take a little while. Zedekiah begins to plan a revolt in 594 because, paying those heavy taxes is hard. Let me put a little word in for you. Don't fight the IRS. Just pay the tax. Because it doesn't work out real well. It didn't for Zedekiah either. And Zedekiah has made allies of Edom, Moab, Ammon, Tyre, Sidon. These are all ones who don't want to be under Nebuchadnezzar either. And so they all think they're going to gang together. What we'll read in the prophecies that follow is all of these nations that surrounded Israel said, look what they did to you. Look what they did. They're not doing that to us. And they were destroyed because of how they treated Israel. Zedekiah was actually brought to Babylon and interrogated. Baruch's brother, the scribe, Jeremiah's friend, his brother, accompanies Zedekiah. And that's why we get so much detail in the book of Jeremiah about it. And there are other scrolls that contain other prophecies about Babylon's eventual fall are now part of the book of Jeremiah. 593 is when Ezekiel sees his first vision. I wanted to put this so that you see that there's a lot of stuff going on in these 11 years, all over the Babylonian Empire. God is working in more places than just Jerusalem. And that's why it's so important. So he's now 30 years old, which he was going to be a priest when he turned 30. He had to wait till he was 30, and he's on his 30th birthday thinking, there's no temple, there's no sacrifices, there's no place to be a priest. I'm useless, I'm worthless. And that's when God calls him to be his prophet. Before the fall of Jerusalem, In 592, and we'll read about this in the book of Ezekiel coming up, the glory of God is taken from the temple. Now, what would that be? Where did the glory of God reside? Between the wings of the cherubim above the mercy seat. So we're talking about the ark, that gold ark with the cherubim and the mercy seat. That has been removed from the temple before it will be destroyed. Several years. The cherubim remove it. At the same, we'll read about this in the book of Ezekiel. The righteous in Jerusalem who are still there after the others have been taken to the Chebar, along with Ezekiel and so forth. The righteous people are sealed by putting a mark on their forehead. They will not be lost in the siege. They will not starve to death. They are sealed. That's in Ezekiel. Zedekiah finally conspires with Egypt. He says, we need some help. This is getting bad. He's getting very close to coming and taking us over. And Jeremiah says, don't go to Egypt. Nebuchadnezzar is going to destroy Egypt too. They're not going to be any help. Don't ever go to Egypt for help. That's essentially what was told Israel from the very beginning. Never go to Egypt for help. That's not good. We freed you from Egypt from one time, never go back. Never go back. So we'll continue in 589. Nebuchadnezzar invades Jerusalem and begins his 18-month siege. Now, Jerusalem is a walled city on a hill, not real easy to overtake and destroy. You have to build siege ramps all around it. And you have to blockade all access to the city, completely surround it and blockade so nothing can get in and nothing can get out. That's the way and then you bit by bit, you encroach upon the city. And that began in 589. And we have the siege that begins 18 months. And there's actually a record in the Babylonian documents, which can be have been preserved, that they had brought 300 mules with iron axes for the express purpose of breaking down those 12 gates that were in the wall. They were massive, huge gates that were protection. They were almost as good as the stone wall to protect the city. Well, how did he know he needed that? He had been there twice before. And he says, generals, here's your problem. There's these gates. If you want to get in that city, you've got to tear down those gates. It took till the end of that 300 mules worth of axes. All but one was used, and on the 9th of Av, that's the 5th month of the Jewish calendar, the 9th day, we go on to Zedekiah. The city is besieged, and during that besieging, the gates are broken down, and the Babylonians begin to enter. In the meantime, during this time, Zedekiah has put Jeremiah in the cistern, which is in the courtyard. It's a place to collect water near the palace, in the courtyard of the palace, puts him down in this dry cistern, which has a muddy bottom, and leaves him there. And Ebed-Melech, we'll read about him too. Ebed-Melech is a eunuch serving the court. And he goes to the king, he says, this is not right. You can't do this. This is a prophet of the Lord. And Zedekiah allows, he says, okay, he didn't want anybody else to know that he was going to do this. So he said, take some guys from your slaves and you go and rescue him. So Ebed-Melech takes some rags and stuff from storage and goes and drops them into the cistern and makes a sling for this very now emaciated prophet, and brings him up out of the cistern and rescues him and brings him into the courtyard prison. Meanwhile, the Nebuchadnezzar's forces are entering the city, but they've rescued, and they feed him bread, what they have, what they're able to eat, and keep Jeremiah alive. God always provides. He always provides someone to rescue his people, his faithful people. So he's freed. It was getting near the end. Months are now remaining in the survival of Jerusalem. Zedekiah sees the end is imminent, and he takes his family and staff and tries to sneak through the wall that leads to a road that leads to Jericho, and he would be able to get to the river and get out of there and get to Moab or someplace and hide. Well, they get out. Now, in the meantime, let me back up a minute. Riblah, a city in Syria near Damascus, is the headquarters of Nebuchadnezzar, where he has set up his headquarters. He sends his forces from there. He himself does not go at this time, because he said, I don't think their God will let us burn that temple. I wonder if Daniel had gotten to him, because Daniel's been in prison or in captivity in the court of Babylon for many years now, since 605. So I'm thinking he has heard Daniel enough to say, his God is really maybe stronger than I'm thinking. I better not go. And besides, I remember what happened to Sennacherib. If we try to take down Jerusalem, it might happen to us too. So I'm sending my guys down. I'm staying up here in Riblah. Well, on the road to Riblah is where the king and Zedekiah and his family and so forth were trying to escape through. And they were caught because the city had been surrounded, and they were caught. As was prophesied by both Ezekiel and by Jeremiah and by, I think, Zephaniah, the king was captured. His sons and his family members were all killed in front of him, and then he was blinded and taken to prison in Babylon, where he was killed. So he did not get away. He died just as the siege of Jerusalem was ensuing. They're finishing up. In 586, and there are months that go with this, but it's hard to know exactly how they correspond. But this is in the summer of 86, 586, somewhere around the 9th of Av, our August. Well, guess what the Jews in Jerusalem celebrated last weekend at the Wailing Wall? The 9th of Av. Tish B'Av is called. They celebrate the fall, not celebrate, they mourn the fall of the first temple, this one, the second temple, same day in 70 AD, and some other maladies that have happened to the Jews over there. This is a day of mourning for the whole nation. The Tish B'Av. They read the book of Lamentation aloud in the synagogue, the whole book. It's mourning. The 9th of Ab. What's the odds that the 9th of Ab, the first temple goes down, and the 9th of Ab, the second temple goes down? Probably a coincidence. But it's the 11th year for Zedekiah and the 18th year, and you reckon his years from 605. The 18th year of Nebuchadnezzar, 832 Jews are the only ones that survived all of this besieging and starvation and so forth, and they were deported to Jerusalem, that are to Babylon. They are not among the captives with Ezekiel. These are captives who go and die in slavery in Babylon. Jerusalem has been sacked and burned. The prophecies of Ezekiel and Jeremiah have happened. Nebuzaradan is the general, probably the supreme general over all of Nebuchadnezzar's forces. He was second in the command only to Nebuchadnezzar the king himself. And he finds Jeremiah in the prison, the courtyard prison, in the palace prison, and says, come on out of there. If you want to go, you can go to Babylon with us. We'll take care of you. We'll let you ride there, or you can stay here, or you can go any place you want. That was also prophesied that Jeremiah would not be among the captives. And Nebuzaradan says Gedaliah is made the governor. Now, where do we read about Gedaliah? I don't think I have it on any of these charts, but Gedaliah is a royal. Is not in the line of David, but he's a royal. And he's made governor of Judah, and there's no king. They're all gone, no kings left, but we got to keep this place from just completely being destroyed, going to pieces. The city has been burned, the walls have been torn down, the temple has been burned, all of the gold has been removed, all the valuables have been removed. Everything is sacked. There's nothing left of the city of Jerusalem. It is totally uninhabitable. But there are people, it says in Jeremiah, the poorest of the poor were left to be vine dressers and farmers. The very of value to nobody. They got to stay in Judah to keep the place from being overtaken by animals, I guess, because it was totally desolate. They were not living in Jerusalem. It was uninhabitable. And it will remain that way until Zerubbabel comes back, which we'll read about later. The problem is there wasn't an agreement that Nebuchadnezzar's appointee Gedaliah should be the governor. And Ishmael, who was also a royal, said, no, I should be the governor, and it should be my province. And he kills Gedaliah and all of his people. And now we have even more chaos. And the few Jews that are left take Jeremiah by force. He didn't want to do it. And they flee to Egypt. We'll read about their end in Jeremiah, but it just goes from bad to worse. It was not good to go to Egypt. They should have stayed in Judah and trusted the Lord. He would have taken care of them, but they wouldn't do that. And so there is now 586 BC. The world is in the control of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. He has taken everything up to the Nile River practically. He hasn't quite finished Egypt yet. He will get to that. but he has taken over everything. And that little picture, the map picture, you can see how extensive the Babylonian Empire is. It's massive. But Nebuchadnezzar has learned how to be a statesman. And he orders things to be different in his empire than the Assyrians did. He learned from the Assyrians what not to do, kind of thing. And he was a good emperor, if you will. And I believe that he did things well. He was called by God to be his servant to destroy Israel, Judah, Jerusalem, the temple. He was said to be his servant to do that job. Nebuchadnezzar did that job. But Daniel had been sent way ahead to give him sound advice about how to be a good king, an effective king. And we see that the protection that has happened, Ezekiel and the captives, the sparing of Jeremiah, the setting up of governors all over the whole empire so that they didn't have warring factions among them. Things were fairly stable and settled for a period of time because I think of Daniel's influence. Daniel is listed at this time as, along with Noah and Job, there's only 3 men whose prayers were always heard. It says, even if Noah or Job or Daniel prayed, they were considered to be the most godly men in the Jewish history. Kind of interesting thing to do. Okay, we're come to the end of the or the fall of Jerusalem. If you'll take a look at the 52nd chapter of Jeremiah, that's that section where Kings and Chronicles is in your book. And the 52nd chapter of Jeremiah is sort of a summary. And it begins with the last 11 years of the kingdom of Judah, and Zedekiah as his first years, and we see what the Lord has done, what the Nebuchadnezzar has done, what the general Nebuzaradan has done. All of that is there. And we have the very end, chapter 52 of Jeremiah. This is the very last chapter of the book of Jeremiah, sort of a summary of all of the stuff that's been going on for his whole life, practically. By the way, Lamentation was written prior to this chapter being written. It was written after the fall of Jerusalem, before they were taken to Egypt. There was a short period of time there when Jeremiah wrote that book of Lamentation we'll talk about later. So it says in chapter 52, verse 27, the king of Babylon put them to death. That would be the king and all of his family and staff, put them to death at Riblah, at the hand of the land of Hamath. So Judah went into exile from its land. 586 BC began the exile. Jeremiah had told Daniel and Ezekiel in their prophecies how long it will be. It will be 70 years, and it will begin in 605. The 70 years are counted from 605 with the first captives. Okay, so Judah is in exile. Why I want you to note that, and there's some other things there, but what I want you to note is from this point on in the rest of Jewish history that is recorded after this point, Israel refers to the Lord when they come back from exile at the end. They refer to this exile instead of the exile from Egypt. From Egypt to this point, one section of Jewish history. From this point forward to the present, by the way, is the rest of the Jewish history, which they believe is, they're still waiting for the Messiah. So now, this is where we get some of the reckoning of the numbers. He puts in here that Nebuchadnezzar deported in the 7th year. That would be the 7th year of Nebuchadnezzar's time. That was where I got the 3,023 Jews. That would be the 598, 597 time. In the 18th year, they took off 832 Jews. All these are records of Babylon, by the way. They're Babylonian records of the numbers of exiles that they took, and they're available. And then in the 23rd year, which is after all of this, they took off another 745 Jews. And that's where he gets this 4,600 people were deported. So Ezekiel didn't have a really large congregation, just over 3,000 apparently, but they didn't like him at all. And they were mad at Ezekiel because his prophecies did not suit them at all at first. Okay, we know from this account as well, and this is why we know that Jeremiah probably lived quite a while after this exile time, that evil Marduk, who is the son of Nebuchadnezzar, took over after the death of Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon. And in 560, right in the beginning of his reign, he allowed Jehoiachin, remember him? Who is now 55 years old, has been in prison all this time since he was 18. Let him loose, let him now eat at the king's table in Babylon. Apparently, according to First Chronicles genealogy, he had many sons. Shealtiel and then Zerubbabel. And Zerubbabel is who is the one who brings people back from Babylon to Israel. We're not going to be talking about any more history of Israel. It's done. From now on, we're talking about prophets. We'll spend our time, the rest of the Old Testament will be on the prophecies. And the reason that they're arranged, I put them at the end, is they have to do with the end of time. And there are a lot of things that they'll refer to about coming back from exile and so forth. But the idea is that God said, okay, I told you you were going to be exiled for your disobedience, but I'm going to bring you back. And the prophets talked about that. And then I have a plan for way in the future. And we'll read about that. So God's not done with Israel. They did it to themselves. Would you agree? From their disobedience. I guess the most important lesson we have from this, we have this historical record here that we can look at how God fulfilled his prophecy exactly. What do we know about prophecy? When God says, I will, it will. It will. Exactly how he says. Do you notice that he never gives a time frame? Ever. It won't say, well, in this many years, the kingdom will come to an end because of, no, it is never given a time frame. That is an important lesson as well about prophecy. Don't try to fit it into a time, because it's his appointed time, and only he knows what it is. And that's why the Lord Jesus said, it'll happen. When the apostles, the Peter, James, and John, well, when is all this going to happen? I don't know. Jesus said, only the Father knows. He has an appointed time, and he keeps it a secret. He didn't tell us. He gives us signs and warnings, and the Lord Jesus gave us, and all of these prophets gave us signs and warnings to know what to look for. So we know it's near. And we know some things are still ahead of us because we haven't seen those signs yet. But that's the value of prophecy. I know it's hard to read through these prophecies, especially Jeremiah, because it's so back and forth and all over the place. But we need to see what the Lord told us through his prophets, because that was revealed to us. Hebrews starts its whole book with, at various times and in various ways, God spoke to us through his prophets. That was the first sentence of the book of Hebrews. But today, he speaks to us through his Son. So, these prophets were given a message. We need to read it, and we need to study it, and we need to see what it says that applies to us. So, take a look at your schedule. We have a minute or two here. Take a look at your schedule. I want to make sure you hear this clearly. Next week, August the 16th. Oh, by the way, Christine's grandkids are coming, so we'll have the evening people with us. The 16th. But that's the last of this section. Then there's a break. We will begin the prophecy of Jeremiah, primarily what he says to the people of Israel before the fall, the message that he gave, which is applicable to us today, and look at the book of Lamentation as well, because that tells us the heart of Jeremiah. He wept over that city because they would not listen to it. He tried his best. His whole life he tried to get them to listen, but they wouldn't listen. No, Isaiah was told, do all this, and Isaiah said, well, for how long? And the Lord said, for the rest of your life. But they're not going to listen to you. We have a problem with listening to the prophets. Even today, we have a problem listening because we don't want to hear what they have to say. We don't. That's why I put that YouTube on yesterday's email to listen about judgment. We've got to wake up and listen and pay attention, because it's happening. And if we don't want to listen, we can be like the people of Israel and just let it happen to her and not be prepared. We have two things that the prophet Habakkuk told us. It's coming. Here are the two things you need to do. What are they? Trust and wait. Trust and wait. Our break is August 23rd, and we'll come back and finish up in Jeremiah. And then I'm going to go back to the prophecy of Isaiah. I know that's not in chronological order, but Isaiah's prophecy is for the rest of time, which includes us. So, okay, questions or comments?
Question.
Yeah,
In the green and blue,
yeah.
year 587 BC, the last sentence. I thought it was Zedekiah that was blinded, not his sons.
His sons were killed.
Sons were killed and somebody was blinded. I can't remember who it was.
He was blinded
So,
and taken as prisoner.
so Zedekiah was blinded and the sons were killed.
Yes.
Gotcha.
The prophecy about Zedekiah was he would not see Babylon. Well, he didn't see it because he was blinded. So, any other comments or questions? I know it's all history, but it is so important for us to pay attention to. Yeah.
Harry,
Yes,
did you get the stuff in the blue and the green? Is that mostly from Jeremiah, you said?
mostly from Jeremiah,
Okay,
because it will say in the 4th year of Jehoiakim or something, these events
Okay.
happen. But it's all spread out through.
okay.
Yes, Sarah.
Yeah. The captives that were on the river Chebar, what happened to them? Did they end up going to Babylon too?
No, Chebar is in Babylon, in the province of,
Yeah.
it's one of the provinces that's right around the city. They were there for 70 years. Well, part of the 70 years. They went a little later.
Was that the first round of people?
They were the second. They were the second round. Daniel and the few royals were the first round. They were there the longest. Daniel was through the whole thing. He saw the prophecy and the actuality of the release. That he was a very old man too when he died.
So Terry, would you say that that deported, that other 745 Jews in the 23rd year of Nebuchadnezzar, is that a fourth?
No, it's I wrote it out as there were people left in the land that apparently were not cooperating, and Nebuchadnezzar went and just collected up this 745 left and brought them into Babylon.
Okay.
But it was before the end of his life, Nebuchadnezzar's life.
Yeah.
But it was after the fall of Jerusalem, so they would not have been living in Jerusalem. They would have been living in Judah.
Okay.
Ones who said were left to take care of the.
They were the vine dressers and farmers. And that is partly why we know that the Samaritans took over everything and why Nehemiah had so much trouble when he came back to Jerusalem to build the wall. The Samaritans were trying to say, this is ours.
Oh, right.
All of the Jews are gone. This is ours.
Mhm.
But that's Nehemiah. That's way down. Good to see everybody. I'm going to say goodbye to online unless there's another question.